Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a good sleep. I did, thanks to Advil PM. And this morning I'm going to show you how we quickly can block out the basic parts of this Duralit hand mixer. And as I mentioned earlier in the semester, whenever you start working on something, try to block things out into the basic elements. So here we see half a sphere, cylinder, 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 and then, of course, the handle part. Now, the easiest way to create the main body is basically by creating first a sphere and then extruding a circular cross-section out to form the cylinder. So let's do that. So here's my basic scene. I'm going to delete my cube. Going to side view by pressing 3 on my numpad and 5 on my numpad to switch between orthographic and perspective. I'm also inside maybe metric, so I know the hand mixer is maybe roughly 30 centimeters or something like that. And first I would like to bring in a background image. So I can press N to show my property panel, go to background images, turn it on, click add image, open, go to the desktop, select my image, and place it. Okay, now as you can see, this image is way too big, so I can scale it down a little bit. And maybe change this cube to 30 centimeters, because now I have a reference for my image to scale it down better. Maybe something like this. This image is anyway a perspective shot, so it's not really a blueprint. So you can't really 100% accurately work with it. Okay, and then this image, for example, I only would like to be visible when I'm in right view. So if I click 1 to go into front view, I don't see it. Only if I press 3, I will see that image. I could actually add another image and then make that image only visible in the front view. Okay, so at this point, I can go ahead, add a UV sphere. Don't forget about segments and rings. So maybe something like 16 is fine. Maybe 20 centimeters. So it's a little bit smaller. And then I can go into edit view. And it's really important that you rotate this sphere 90 degrees so that the poles are actually horizontally. And we do this because in object mode, I'm going to move the sphere roughly to where it should be at the center, and then in edit mode, I scale it down, and then I can just eyeball adjust it a little bit more. Kind of like maybe there, this was a little bit too small, like this. Okay. Because then I can go ahead and select all those vertices, press X and delete them. And I mentioned during last class that when you work with NURBS, always think about a NURBS patch as a sheet of paper, which you could fold and bend into, for example, a cylinder or also a sphere. So think about if you take a scissor and I cut along this line, I could unfold the rest of this geometry back into a flat sheet. And because the goal is later to generate geometry that will translate easily into something Alias can understand, we have to model in a way how Alias will work. And that means that I have to adjust my sphere this way so I can, with E, extrude this ring out instead of, for example, doing it this way. So I bring this one down, select all these points, I'm going to hide this one, and then I move this one out. So you see, for example, let's say I mark this edge and I would take a scissor and would cut along it, you would actually end up with two parts. So for example, everything from here and that and this part. And of course, I mean, I can select a ring and extrude it out. But you also see that, for example, if I select a loop, the loop goes completely around it. Same here, and here the loop, for example, doesn't go completely around. And that's really not the way how you want to work. And in this way, if I select a loop, you see all these loops always end here where my last selected point is. Because again, if I imagine taking a scissor and I would cut this open, so this object, imagine being out of paper, I could just simply unfold it and into a flat sheet. So for example, those points will flow along this way. Okay, so maybe I bring this one over a little bit to here, and then I see this whole object can maybe go up a little bit. So you see I do that in object mode, and then I press tab. So I have actually my my ring finger always on the tab key. And then maybe I position it roughly here, press E, right click, and then I click on my arrow, or you can also press G, and in this case Y. Now I would like to close this area, so I press E, escape, and then S. So by pressing escape after I pressed E, I prevent the vertices to move by accident. And then you can press E and S and 0. And by pressing 0, you actually scale all these points together. And that makes it look like a closed surface. However, all the individual points are still there. You see, I can still open that surface, but by scaling and then entering 0, they're all scaled together at one point, so they overlap. So physically, this actually would be a closed object or watertight. Then I can add a subdivision surface modifier, or in case you would like to work in full screen all the time in 3D view, you could press Shift Spacebar. You see then the interface is completely occupied by the 3D view. You could press Spacebar, type in Add Space Modifier, click Modifier, and then select Subdivision Surface Modifier. But then you still would have to show this one to set the settings. And I'm only going to set it to 2 because that's all I need. Maybe spacebar and smooth, so it's shaded softly. And let's go to side view. Maybe those 2 rings, I move in a little bit, and then I demoed during the class how to do a material separation line. So I will add 2 loop cuts quite closely to each other, and then I zoom in a little bit, press Ctrl R, scroll my mouse wheel till I have 5 cuts, or I simply press 5 on the keyboard and click and enter. And then with Alt, I click on the middle loop cut, and then I press S and slightly scale it inwards. Okay. And if I zoom out, this cut is actually quite big. So if you would like that to be tighter, all we can do is we can select those other 6 loop cuts, press S, and now in my model I have to use Y as my scale direction. So I press Y and I move my mouse down. Thanks to continuous grab, I can continue going over the display screens, and my mouse always comes back on the opposite side. And then I scale it together a little bit. Okay, perfect. Good. So, want to add 2 more objects. Cursor to selected. I'm going to add cylinder. Press T for the tool options. Vertices 16. Radius maybe 5 centimeters. Depth maybe 2 centimeters. And let's move it down. And position it somewhere where it should be. But what I do first is I will select this top face and simply delete it. And here I do the same. The reason why I deleted the last face, if I add a subdivision surface modifier, you might get interesting artifacts like this. You can see how there's kind of like a star pattern. So what we want to do is, by deleting this face, then I select this edge, I press E and S, scale it in, E and S and 0. So you see, that looks more like a cylinder. And then, of course, I have to tighten this edge a little bit more because this edge is quite sharp, or the radius is small. So I add additional loop cuts to try to tighten that area. Shade smooth. And then can maybe try to place it correctly, and this one has to go up more till it sinks in there. Perfect. Okay. Now actually this object I can recycle, so I press Shift D, go into edit mode, press R and 90. Oh, actually, hold on. No, I do that in object mode, R90, because I noticed that R and 9, no, I'm doing R and 90 degrees. Yeah, the object center actually got changed. But that's not really a big deal. So you see, for example, what I'm talking about, there's this object center dot, but I would like it to be lined up, for example, where all these points are. So what I'm doing is in edit mode, I select the star pattern, and then in edit mode, I say Shift S, cursor to selected. So I position my 3D cursor right at the center where all these points are. And then in object mode, I go to origin and origin to 3D cursor, and there. Perfect. And then I can go ahead, move it to there. And for example, I press S and Shift Y, because all I want to do is scale it down along the Z and the X axis. Okay, great. Also, just for you to keep in mind, good practice, the scale of those objects are off, so best would be whenever you did something in object mode, like for scaling, apply scale. Here, object, apply scale. Yeah, and they're all scale set to 1. Okay, great. So that's how, for example, we would block out the basic body parts.